I think his designs are gorgeous, and I see them the same way that Michael does. I see the potential for variation within them. The elements are so few, and so, you know, he's got the cone, the sphere, and the bowl, but there's unlimited potential for variation, and that's what's so interesting, and without getting messy.
There's not much other material that has a memory like glass does. Every way you touch it, everything you do to it, in the end, it remembers. Every mark is present. For me, it was figuring out how to relate to the material without doing anything. It's not an individual thing, basically. It's not like a studio artist sitting in the studio waiting for the paint to dry and in charge of making all the decisions and being able to erase the decision and redraw the line. With glass, it's reacting to something that's almost living.
In terms of classically, like how I was trained in the factory, is kind of like running through a classical musician sort of school where you learn your chords and your notes, and then you learn to pair them together, and then until you can finally play, and the music can just, instead of you thinking about what note to hit, you just are able to make that flow, composing as you go. It's difficult in the beginning because you're thinking about the pieces, you're thinking about the forms, you're thinking about what he wants, and as soon as you can feel what he wants, then the forms just come. Once you achieve one that he likes, and you get an overall feel for the project and the feeling of the pieces, then you can expand upon those designs and create things within the boundaries of his aesthetic.
When you look at the finished product that he's come up with as the centerpiece for the Pilchuck auction this year, it just shows a clarity and a simple sense of design that's very special.
He has pared down the number of kinds of objects in the work. There's a relationship of two parts. And so all of the focus is on where those two attach and how one sits and the other one sits in that piece. And so that relationship has got to be very, very precise. It can be very subtle, but it has to be precise. It can't be just anything. That's where all that variation is possible too. He's also got this thing going on with the pieces where he's got the inside of the bowl and the cone, which is starting to interfere with that skin and start to be a part of the inside. So visually, you're going to travel from the cone to the inside of the bowl. And you're going to also be really excited to see that little bit of a curve that happens when the cone lays up against the bowl and changes that circle. Just starts to interrupt it or interfere with it a little bit, give it a little bit of excitement there.
It's about cleanliness, proportion, and relationships. The only place where I really had an understanding of what mathematics might have been was geometry. And to make anything perfect is very difficult. And perfect is about the relationship between those three forms.
The little clear marble is a place where the world around the piece enters into it, because clear glass is like a camera. It takes its environment and it throws it back at you. So it might turn it upside down, but you've got these very clear, these very concise, bright, solid color geometrical forms, and then you've got this little photograph of the world that it sits in. And that is something that I think is really interesting to look at and think about. Like that little curve where the cone touches the bowl, that takes you into a place away from the stark geometry, but just a little, just a little. It's like an invitation to another, it's like a doorway, I guess, into seeing pieces a little bit differently.
It's the alchemical aspect. It's the fascinating aspect that there's no rules, that there's no written, it's a completely learned experience. It's experiential. It's again about relationships with the material and the people. So what it really does for me is it basically expresses what I believe all artists try to speak to within their art, which is, the human condition or the human relationship or their own personal point of view.